we're bringing in Emily Bourne. She's the president for the agency, a division of the Meadowbrook Insurance Agency. Emily, great to have you with us. How are you?
I'm good, Ronnie. Thanks for having me today, and I'm glad to hear your back's feeling better. You make a great case for why insurance is important.
I know, right? Right. And it is the Kleinschmidt Agency, right?
Correct. Just Kleinschmidt Insurance.
With that, can I ask you, because unfortunately, when you become a homeowner, these are some of the things that you don't really think about. We've had water issues here in my house, thankfully not from flooding, but when calling in a claim, wording matters. What do you tell your clients?
That is correct. So I too actually experienced some water damage in my own household. And it's funny because we counsel our clients on what to do to be prepared for this event, what to do in response to this happening in their own home. And I found myself, halfway through the cleanup process, and I thought, I'm not even following my own advice here. So it is a very frustrating situation. And so while there's not really, any specific wording, there's not a whole lot of coaching that we can do with our clients. We just caution everyone, when you have a water event, where the water comes from is very important. A lot of public officials are using the term flood versus water backup, and those are two totally separate policies. So it is pretty important when you're filing a claim and talking to your agent about the source of the water damage.
So, and with that, Emily, I have to tell you right there, those words mean so much. And so when you're talking to your clients, how do you try to tell them, because you're on the front end as well and trying to sell them the insurance, and how do they know what's different? Because we all just say flood. It's flood. No, don't say those words.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you do want to, it's very important on how you're going to have this conversation. So when we're talking about water backup, that's water that originates up from the drain, from inside of your home, versus a flood, which is more water encroaching from the outside walls and windows into the home.
So with that, because I just learned something right there, how do you educate your clients in that? Because when someone's calling in a claim, they may not know, and they're just saying what they think. Oh, it's flooded. What do I do?
So there's a few things that we do recommend if you've had one of these events, in response. One of the things that we recommend first, take photos of the water damage as it's occurring, at its worst, to provide to the insurance claims adjuster. You're going to want to take any necessary steps to prevent further damage, not to be confused with making the repairs yourself, because that can actually make matters worse, or kind of cover up any damage that might have existed before. So, take necessary steps to prevent further damage. A really good example of this would be shutting the water off, or in cases where a tree may have fallen on the property, or on the roof, put a tarp over the roof. That would prevent further water from coming in, but wouldn't necessarily repair the hole that's left in the roof. And then finally, discuss the damage with your agent before filing the claim. Sometimes it makes sense to file the claim. That's what insurance is there for. And other times, it's more of a long-term rate preservation strategy to, maybe you have a $500 deductible and you have $750 worth of damage. Does it make sense to file that claim and get a surcharge for the next few years and pay potentially more than that $250 versus just paying the $750 out of pocket? I know that's a lot of math, but those are the types of conversations that we have with our clients prior to filing the claim, so that ultimately they are making that decision with all of the information needed in order to make the best decision for their household long term.
Okay, Emily, I'm telling you right now, if I didn't have USAA right now, I'd be hiring you or going with you, because you just talked magic in the last minute. And these are things that people don't understand because you're in an emergency. So they don't really know how to respond, and they don't understand that the words that they say can impact their future, uh, you know, relationship with the insurance company. Because as someone who has covered so many floods in Detroit, you had people who were paying out of pocket because they were afraid that they were going to lose their insurance.
Yeah, it's a tough situation for sure. And, our job as an independent agency is to just counsel our clients, give them the best information on what the coverage means, how it plays out. We don't make a strong case for or against any type of coverage. Our job is primarily just to educate them on the pros and cons of selecting any particular item. And, that's what risk management is all about. So it sometimes it works out in your favor, and sometimes it's like, oh man, hindsight is 2020, but that's, it's not always the most exciting work, in the insurance industry, but it is very important work. And so we really make it a point here to try and do that for our clients.
Words matter. And so with that, Emily, can I ask you, is it okay to call up your agent, especially someone that you have a good relationship with, to talk to them about the situation and not go on record yet? How does that work in the insurance world?
That's a tough question.
Should I
yes,
should I file a claim? Should I, or I guess not on record because I'm thinking media, but is it okay for me to call up my insurance agent, especially someone if I know, and say, this is my situation. Can you advise me on how to go further?
Yes, actually that's our preferred method of going through this process, because it does allow for that conversation, and it does allow opportunities to kind of coach and guide and educate our clients on that. So that's not, there's no fear there. Now if somebody were to say, hey, a car ran into the side of my house and I'm missing half of the wall, should I or shouldn't I file a claim? I mean, there's a little bit of a duty to report that on our end. But if it's just, the small nuances in and out, where it could go either way, we like to leave that. In fact, we make it a point to leave that decision to our clients. We don't make that decision for them.
And that's really kind of where these relationships come in, by going with a smaller agency such as yours. Again, we're talking with Emily Bourne. She's the president of the Kleinschmidt Agency, a division of the Meadowbrook Insurance Agency. And we're hearing so much lately about FEMA coming into some of these areas that have been hit hardest by the flooding recently. How does that play into the overall personal insurance arena?
Well, FEMA is sort of a last resort, and they're also sort of they're unpredictable, right? There's no guarantee, there's no real system in place to decide who would get FEMA relief funds. It's sort of up to state and city and local officials on how they're going to distribute that in the event that they make a federal plea and it's granted, right? So, the safest bet is to purchase that insurance policy so that you get total control over whether or not you're able to repair your home.
And can we talk a little bit about the insurance policy and buying your insurance? Because I think a lot of people don't understand the clarification between flood and sewage backup.
Correct. So when you are going through, there's a really quick litmus test, and it goes a little like this. Have you added any square footage to your home or done any remodeling projects recently? Have you purchased any high valued items or inherited any collectibles or fine arts? Have you started a home business? Have you considered what you would do watching all of this unfold on the news? Have you asked yourself, wow, what would I do in that situation? So if the answer to any of those questions is yes, first call you should make after wrapping up this podcast is going to be to your agent. It's important to familiarize yourself with your coverages. And that you have now, but not just what you have now, but also what options have become available since you last had that conversation with them. There's a lot of new options out on the market. Not every company offers them, but as the consumer, you would be doing your due diligence if you had that conversation and asked your agent and at least knew, hey, this isn't available to me, or it is, and this is how much it costs. I'm going to make the decision on whether or not I want to purchase that and protect myself.
I'm sitting here, Emily, and I'm going, yes, yes, and yes. And you really simplify things for so many people. So when you're in that moment, because people just panic, um, how should they first react? What are the first things that someone should do when they're suffering from water damage? And we'll talk about the floods because, this has been crazy. My dear friends over at the Church of Messiah in downtown Detroit, well, the east side of Detroit, they were hit 3 times within a month. And it's just so hard for them to recover. But we also know at some point in time, some of the people in certain areas don't want to report the damage because to their insurance agency, because it's going to make their insurance premiums jump, or maybe even the potential of being dropped.
That's a great question. So here's my Cliff's Notes summary of that answer. Insurance is one of the few things that we purchase throughout our lives in hopes of never having to use it, right? So with that said, when those instances happen, unfortunately, because it's more of a matter of when, not if. So when those instances happen, the worst possible case or situation that anybody could find themselves in is to have paid for a policy that goes, it just barely gets to where they need it to cover them for years, only to find out that, hey, there's actually no coverage on your policy for this specific situation. So while it does cost a little bit more, while it, there's a little bit of hesitance there, the best method to move forward is going to be to try and price out that policy. And honestly, it's, if you break down the cost of a homeowner's policy on average in the state of Michigan, it's less than a cup of coffee a day. So and that's not to, downplay any financial hardships or anything. It's just in comparison, it is an affordable purchase. It's a good investment to protect your assets on the back end if this does happen.
So Emily, if I can ask you, when it comes to that, when does an individual know that they should report it to their insurance company versus when they should not? And is it harder to get some of the insurance in certain areas rather than others?
It's not harder to get insurance in certain areas according to others, but they do go, they use several factors when determining a rate. One of those is going to be what territory you're in, and it's not necessarily where you're at, but the amount of loss in any given area for any particular insurance provider. So they're not really, this has nothing to do with location. When you're reporting a claim, that's why we recommend contacting your agent and having that conversation. They can guide you through the process before you even get to the claim filing point.
Emily Bourne with us here on the MegaCast. She's the president for Kleinschmidt Agency, which is a division of the Meadowbrook Insurance Agency. I've learned so much already. And I will tell you, we've had a couple water issues in my house, but I'm going to knock on wood. Not real wood. I need real wood. So to make sure that it doesn't happen again, because it's been a nightmare to go through. But I will say, Emily, with that, how should someone base their policy? What questions should they ask an insurance agent? Because I think a lot of times people are just kind of fuzzy on some of the gray lines when it comes to their policy.
Yeah, and that's a good question. And the short answer is their agent should be asking them the questions. Okay, so that's we're the professionals, we kind of do this for a living. And so we kind of understand where problem areas might arise. It's important to ask those probing questions to get to the root answer, because not everyone understands the coverages that are available. New items that have come on the market in the last 5 to 10 years. And there are a lot of clients and a lot of consumers out there where it's been a long time since they've even heard from their agent. With the coronavirus and remote work, things got a little hairy last year with no fault reform, and we were pretty busy here. So, we made it a point to reach out to our clientele, but we also got a lot of phone calls that said, hey, I can't get a hold of my agent. And so that's the responsibility of your agent, is to ask those questions and coach you on those options and ultimately let you make that decision.
You bring up so many good points. We'd love to have you on again if you want to talk about the no-fault insurance and the changes in that, because that is like fuzzy area for me. But when we're talking about this as well, can you tell us a little bit more about your agency and how can people contact you if they want to make a change? Because one of the things I do think which happens, and I will admit, I am so guilty of this, is I just renew my policy every year. And I don't think about looking at the policy and updating it.
Sure. Well, if anybody wants to have a deeper discussion, they can contact our agency main line here in Ann Arbor, is 734-662-3100, or they can visit us on the web at kleinschmidtinsurance.com. Spelling is right there. So it's just www.kleinschmidtinsurance.com, and they can reach out and we'll get them in contact with one of our experts.
Emily, I've learned so much, but is there anything maybe I didn't ask that you want to add before we say goodbye?
My only plea to your viewing audience at this point is, it's hard to react in a situation after the damage is done. So the best case scenario, the best thing you can do for yourself is to be prepared ahead of time. I advocate that every single person should have a home inventory. They should compile a home inventory with receipts, photos, values of items in each room. They can do this in paper format. There are apps out there just with a simple Google search. It is very helpful. It helps you understand your potential loss and your insurance needs if there are any gaps when you're looking at your policy. And it's also nice in those moments of panic to say, I know exactly what I lost. And in fact, I can export it and email it to you in, an hour and a half. So that is my final plea to your viewers, is that is a very handy tool, and we recommend that for everybody.
And that's a great tool. I will say my husband has a comic book collection, and I bought him a computer just to log all of his comic books so we can get insurance on it. So you are so wise. It's been great talking to you. I so appreciate your advice and your wisdom. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Ronnie, and we'd be happy to be back anytime.